Do you believe you're reaching your full potential? What if unlocking your potential was more achievable than you think? According to Jon Acuff, a New York Times best-selling author, it might be just that simple. In his ninth book, All It Takes is a Goal, he guides us through a foolproof method of setting and achieving goals. By focusing on your best moments, navigating the three zones of performance, and fueling your passions, Jon assures us that we can enjoy the journey while guaranteeing success. I love books like this. I need them. That's why I interview people like Jon, because I need to learn. Well, today we're joined by Jon Acuff, the New York Times bestselling author of 8 books, including his recent work, Soundtracks, The Surprising Solution to Overthinking. Jon's literary contributions have been celebrated globally, transcending language barriers. Jon, thanks so much for joining us. And I'm dying to talk about All It Takes is a Goal.
Awesome. Well, it's great to see you again. It's always a fun chance to catch up.
It is fun. It is fun. I feel like just chit-chatting and asking you all about your kids and life and everything, but we can't. We got work to do.
I know. We have to do work and stuff. The baby needs shoes. We got books to sell, Dr. Meg.
Exactly. And I love selling your books because they're so good. I really think you get smarter and smarter as you get older. If not, you at least get to be a better.
I hope that's the case. Yeah, I hope it's not that I get dumber and dumber. No. Theoretically, glory to glory. I want to get wiser every year. How about that?
Exactly. So this is interesting. You said that you really didn't think about living your full potential until you were like 45. How did that happen?
I'm a late bloomer, Dr. Meg. I feel like there's people I meet and they go, I was an entrepreneur when I was 4. I was in the womb doing a business already. Like there's some people that got there fast. I was just a late bloomer. And it really hit me, this idea of potential, when we toured a college campus that I had attended. And it was my wife, myself, and my oldest daughter. And my wife said, wasn't college the best? And I thought, no, it was terrible because I had a 4-year train wreck. And I realized I had wasted all this potential. And it really stopped me into thinking, okay, that was 4 years I can't change, but the next 40 I can.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's something I can do. And I wonder if other people feel that way. That's what started my journey in going, what is potential? How do you actually use it? What does it mean? And so, but it wasn't until my mid 40s that I really started to think about it seriously.
Well, that's intriguing because I've talked with a number of people who say the same thing, and particularly men. My son has said that to me. Now he's way past college. He said, Mom, I just feel in a lot of ways that I just was sort of fumbling at college. I didn't know what I wanted, but it really wasn't until those end sort of years that you go, oh, this is what I'm really good at. And fortunately for me, he figured it out a little bit sooner, but I don't think that's uncommon. Share with our audience what you thought when the light bulb went off and you thought, I can do this. I can really reach my potential. What clicked in your brain?
Well, the first thing that happened was the same thing that happens to most people. I said, okay, I'm not where I want to be. I want to go somewhere else. And then I ran into a wall. I ran into what I call the vision wall, which is this wall that says you have to know exactly where you're going to take the first step. We've misinterpreted amazing books like Stephen Covey's 7 Habits, which says begin with the end in mind. We've turned that into until you know the end, you can't begin. Simon Sinek, start with why. We say, until I know my why, I can't try. And so I felt paralyzed. The first thing I'd love to say, so the next day, Dr. Meg, I got started and I rolled up my shirt sleeves and life was different. I think that's what people sell on Instagram, that overnight.
Exactly.
But for me, it was more this feeling of being stuck. And I couldn't dream about the next 20 years and I felt stuck in the moment. So I did something counterintuitive. And I said, what have been the best moments I've experienced? What in my life has lit me up? And that was an exercise in history versus an exercise in fantasy, which is very difficult for most people. And so I was in the Augusta airport in Georgia, and I wrote best moments on the top of a piece of paper. And then I just started to list out moments that had made me come alive, because I'm a big believer that there's joy to learn from. And our culture doesn't teach that. We're obsessed with sadness and trauma right now culturally. For every 100 articles written on sadness, there's only one on joy. Yeah. So we don't mind joy for all these lessons it can teach us. But I thought, I think that matters. And so I did this exercise, and that's really what kicked me off into, wait a second, I think there's a way to tap into my potential that's practical and tactical.
I love it because I do think that we are currently being trained to ruminate on sadness and bad things.
Oh, well,
Because, yeah,
it,
I mean, yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's so persuasive. I'll give you an example. So one of my favorite studies was at NYU, where they brought in college students, and one group they said make some sentences out of this word bank. The other group they said make some sentences, same instructions, but their words had words related to being old, words like slow and tired and retired and even Florida. And then after 20 minutes, they said, go to the second part of the test down the hall, and they timed them secretly. And the students who had read the words about being old physically acted older. They walked
Oh,
slower just from
wow.
being primed. And so we're accidentally priming ourselves. Every time you wear a shirt that says, I can't adult today, you're telling yourself 1,000 times that day, I'm inadequate. I can't do things. I'm not a good adult. And we have a whole culture. It's sadness wear. We have whole like departments at stores that you go in and it says, I'm sorry I'm late. I didn't want to come. I can't do anything today. We as you see Instagram posts. So I really do believe we've gone from not discussing our feelings to only discussing one feeling. And so what happened for me was when I made this list, all of a sudden it taught me gratitude. It taught me self-awareness. I remembered things I'd forgotten, and it made me present. If you ask your head and your heart to find best moments in the past, they automatically start looking in the present. They go, oh, we should add this moment to our list. And I did it for me, and then I taught hundreds of people, and they all had the same exact experience. What happens is when you make a list, you automatically eventually go, I want more of that. So it changes from an exercise in your past into one about your future, and you go, I want more of these moments. How do I get more of these in my present and my future? And that's when it switches into this really surprising life plan.
You know, it's influencing me right now. I mean, I'm feeling inspired after just 5 minutes of our conversation because so much of what we say to ourselves is, no, I can't. Why try that? Why try that?
Why bother?
Why bother? And my MO has always been for many, many years. Something I heard a pastor say many years ago, if something is worth doing, it's worth doing poorly. Just start doing it. So I went out the chute and I thought, you know what? Somebody needs to speak out on behalf of kids. Now, I'm not great at it, but I'm going to keep doing it until somebody better comes along.
I love
so
that.
That was so freeing because I didn't feel like I needed to do it really well. I was just better than nothing.
Yeah.
And I think so many times we do that in our parenting as well. How many times do you hear young people say, well, I really can't start having kids now because I need a house and I need X number of dollars of income and I need to be settled and I need to know where I'm going. And I thought, well, good luck. You're not going to find that out till you're 60.
Yeah.
And I, on the other hand, was one of those crazy people. I got married at 23 after knowing my husband for 8 months. And I had kids in medical school. And my kids look at me like, were you out of your mind? I said, no, I just wanted it. And I loved it. So talk about really how you coach people, because that's what you do through books and your lectures and teaching. How do you coach people on changing their mindset? Because that's what it has to be. You said, write down what you're good at, write down best moments. Do people give you pushback for that, or how do you get them past that? And how do you shift their thinking?
Well, a lot of times it starts with prompts. So I never abandon somebody to a blank piece of paper. I don't write that way. I don't believe in writer's block. I believe in idea bankruptcy. So I never start a blank piece of paper. I always bring ideas with me. I always bring friends. And so I never abandon somebody to a blank piece of paper. So I would say in moments like that, okay, let's think through some simple prompts. What's an activity that makes life slow down or speed up? Because everybody's had that moment. Where they looked up and the clock is moved without them noticing. Or what's been something you've been complimented on? What's been something that you think everybody can do, but actually it's only you? Because what happens is we overvalue the talents other people have and undervalue our own. So we go, oh, it's no big deal. It's just something I do. And we all go, no, we can't do that. So I usually give them a series of prompts. And what would happen is I would coach them to 30 things. I'd say, write down 30 things, big things, small things. I mean, it could be today. So this morning I went for a run, and while I was running, my brother Will called me, and he's one of the few people on the planet that can talk to me while I run. He doesn't care that it's loud. He doesn't care that I'm out of breath. He's a runner too. And we get to amp each other up and encourage each other. That was the best moment for me. That was a small one. There's big ones. Hitting the New York Times bestseller is a big moment, but there's small ones. And so what would happen is people would start slowly, and I'd have to give them permission often because they were bringing in their own broken soundtracks of, well, that's bragging, and I would say, no false humility. Like, no, like, and authors, you're an author. I told you before we started recording that I just re-listened to Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters again, which I love. And I kind of want to talk to you about that terrible guy you dated that your dad told you about. Like, I love that story. Like,
everybody wants to hear about it.
I'm such a fan of that dad. I'm such a fan of that dad.
Yeah.
But for me, like as an author, like I have to kind of encourage people into it and give them permission. And so that's part of it. And then what happened, Dr. Meg, they would end up writing 100. They'd end up writing 150. They'd find 300. And so it starts a little challenging for some people because, to tell you the truth, I'm naturally pessimistic. I'm jaded. I'm cynical. I'm a sarcastic person. My nature, like I say, I have principal offer syndrome. Like when I get a phone call, I go, something bad happened. That's just my knee jerk. And I have to, but I've tested positivity. I've tested negativity over the years, and the ROI of positivity is so much better. So I have to work hard. So some people do have to kind of ease their way into it, but it becomes really fun. So I've never met somebody that said, I wrote 0. If anything, I'll have somebody go, I wrote 300, and I was crying during it. I was laughing during it. There were so many moments. But again, part of it, you've said mindset. I wrote this book called Soundtracks about mindset, and sometimes you have to figure out your broken soundtracks. And I'll give you an exercise every listener can do in 30 seconds. If you want to understand, if you have broken soundtracks, broken negative thought loops, write down a goal. And it can be any goal. I want to lose 10 pounds this year. I want to run a 5K. I want to know my kids better. Any goal. And then listen to your first thoughts. Listen to your reaction to that goal, because every reaction is an education, and it's educating you about what you really believe. So if your first thoughts are, well, the first 10 diets didn't work, why wouldn't the 11th work? You'll never do this.
Yes.
Nobody does this. Your family isn't going to be able to do this. Or are they positive? And if they're negative, then okay, when I write a good thing in aspiration, I have negative thoughts. And a way around that, a reframe that helps a lot of people, is instead of going, how do I be a good parent? That triggers every fear, every inadequacy. You say, what would a good parent do? And then you write down things a good parent would do, and then you adopt some of those. Because again, if you say, how do I be a good parent? The focus is on you. You feel inadequate. You bring up your past history. If you go, what would a good writer do? What would a good speaker do? What would a good doctor do? And you go, oh, I know that. That's just, I can make a list of those. And then you do a few of those things versus going, I have to change my whole life to even start. And then once you do a few things, you start to get a little bit of momentum. And so you're always going from thought to action and action to result.
Why are we so afraid of allowing ourselves to think positively? For instance, I hear this all the time from dads because I love talking to dads. I would say 50% of the time, a dad will come up to me and he'll say, can I ask you a question? I know I'm probably not doing a good enough job, and I stop him right there. What do you mean you're not doing a good enough job? You came to this parenting conference.
Nobody does that. You're already above average. You're already above average.
Exactly. Yeah. And then their eyes kind of go, oh, well, you're right. So why are we afraid of feeling good and hopeful? And because fear's got to be in there. I really want to lose weight, but I know I can't. Or I really want to write that book, but I know I can't. Is it just that we're trained to think negatively, or we're afraid of thinking and feeling positive?
I think it's a protection mechanism. So I'm afraid of getting hurt. And so I'd rather pre-hurt myself in a way I understand. I'd rather hold back. I'd rather not go for it. Because what if I really go for it and it doesn't work? I'm afraid I won't be able to handle that moment. So I'm going to it's one of the classic fears is, if I don't really try, I'll always know, well, I could have done it if I had really tried. So I'll hold back and I'll preserve myself from knowing I couldn't do it because I'm afraid, what if I really try my hardest and I'm still inadequate? And so I think it's ultimately a protection And it's a broken protectionism scheme. And often it's one you learned. I mean, you know this better than anybody. You learned it as a child and then you repeated it 30 years. And it stopped being true 30 years ago. It stopped being helpful 20 years ago, but it's the tool you have. And even if the tool is no longer useful, it's the one you're comfortable with. So you just use it again and again and again. And so, yeah, a lot of times fear holds you back. And that can look perfectionism. It can look like perfectionism. It can look like overthinking. It can look like procrastination. It can look like imposter syndrome. It can be expressed in a variety of ways, but it's still just a core fear of, I'm going to be inadequate. I think there's only a handful of fears. I'm going to be inadequate to the challenge. I'm going to be abandoned. I'll be isolated. I'll be kicked out of the tribe. Like, people think I'm weird. It'll be more pain than I can handle. It'll be harder than I think it will. And I think often I wrote about this today, like, when I'm too busy, when I allow myself to be too busy, that's often just me avoiding a task I'm afraid of. And instead of saying I'm afraid, I'm filling my calendar so that I can blame my calendar versus myself. Because it's a lot harder for me to go, I'm afraid to write this book. And I'm scared I don't have what it takes. And I'm scared it's going to take a long process. So instead, I'll do 50 things that have nothing to do with anything, but make me feel. And then I get to go, Dr. Meg, I would have written an amazing book, but my schedule's crazy.
I know it's out there. It's in me, but it just won't come out because Oh,
and so
wow.
Then I blame other things, but it comes down to a core inability for me to say, I'm afraid right now. And if I can do that, then I can deal with it. Once you can say it. And the other thing is, if you're afraid, one of the easiest tricks is to write it down. One of my favorite good soundtracks is Paper Shrinks Fear. Paper Shrinks Fear.
Yeah.
Like, in your head, fear is dominating. It's big and it's loud. And so often, if you'll just go, I'm going to put it on a piece of paper. I'm going to see what it is. I'm going to share it with a friend. Sometimes saying it out loud to a friend allows them, because a good friend, Meg, is an archive. They archive moments for you that you forget. In the middle of fear, you forget you've done other hard things. So a good friend goes, hold on a second. This is not the hardest thing you've done. Do you remember this? And they open up this cabinet of those memories that they're archiving for you, and they share them, and you go, oh, that's right. Because fear in the moment goes, this is the hardest thing you've ever done. This is the scariest thing you've ever done. You've never done something like this. You're inadequate to the challenge. And a good friend will go, wait a second. Let me show you your archive.
What an important parenting principle, because parents can be their child's archive because
100%.
We've seen it. Yeah. And we don't want to, overstate a child's talents. But what we can say to them is, wait a minute, you're facing a really hard thing here, but I've seen you overcome hard things. You do hard things well. Yeah. So let's just jump into it again. You talk about zones in your books. You talk about the comfort zone, the potential zone in the middle, and the chaos zones. What are the different zones that you talk about?
Yeah, so I always say that being a high performer doesn't mean you're automatically a high achiever. And if you're listening to this podcast, you're a high performer. The dad who asks you a question is a high performing dad, because he's at the event. Low performers don't come to events. They don't ask Dr. Meg questions for follow-up. You're already a high performer, but we've all known people who are capable of sporadic bursts of high performance, but never turn it into long-term sustainable achievement. And so I studied that. And what happens is high performers bounce between three different zones. The comfort zone we know about. We talk about it all the time. I call it the pajama pants zone. You're stuck. You're in a rut. There's no goals, no action, no progress. But the one that I think is even more dangerous for people that listen to a podcast like this is that chaos zone. And the chaos zone is the opposite end of the spectrum. It's too many goals, too many attempts, too much actions, no progress. It's when you go from 0 to 100 miles an hour. So you go, I'm doing it. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to be a better parent. I'm going to do yoga. I'm going to get a new job. And you have too many goals. I surveyed my audience, the people who read my books, listen to my podcast. The average person had 22.8 goals. Like, do you know why people feel overwhelmed? Because have you ever tried to juggle 22 balls at the same time? Yeah. It's very difficult. That's the chaos zone. And in the middle of those two is the potential zone, the Goldilocks zone. It's not too much, it's not too little. So the book is about helping people figure out, how do you stay in the potential zone? And the reason we have the phrase yo-yo diet in our country is we yo-yo back and forth between the comfort and the chaos. We just go back and forth. Like, we don't diet at all for a year, and then we go, I'm going to weigh every bean on a scale designed for Tour de France cyclists. And you go, what? And everyone listening to this has done that, where they said, it's time to get my life together. I'm getting a Peloton. I had a buddy just the other day say, I want to change my life, so I'm going to start doing this new activity 10 hours a week. And I said, how many hours are you doing it right now? He said 0. I said, so you're going to change 20%. You're going to go for, that's steep. That's steep.
That's very steep.
I said, what if you just tried it changing 2 hours a week for 4 weeks in a row? Like, do an 8-hour test, see? And then if it works, you can grow it a little bit. And that's where I get into easy goals, middle goals, guaranteed goals. What if we climb the ladder deliberately versus saying, I got to go from not trying anything to trying everything all at once?
Boy, do we. And I think that phenomenon is getting worse because we have social media. I see this in mothers, young mothers all the time. And I feel so sorry for them. They're overwhelmed with expectations that they put on themselves because their friends are doing the same thing. You know, what should we feed our baby? If we don't feed him the right thing, if we don't get him into the right school, if we don't watch them doing this, if we, allow them to watch too much, it's all these ifs. And what happens, I see, is they get so gummed up by this huge list of tiny expectations. They drive their kids crazy and they drive themselves crazy. So talk about goal setting and talk about how we do the 3 goals you talk about, the three types of goals you talk about in your book, the easy, middle, and the guaranteed. What's the difference and how do we figure out what those goals should be?
Well, a lot of it, think about a ladder, Meg. Imagine if somebody gave you a ladder and it only had 2 rungs. So say you were going to clean out your gutters and your neighbor said, hey, you can borrow my ladder. And it had 1 rung at the very bottom and 1 rung at the very top. And they said, here you go. You'd say, this is useless. And that's what most people do with their goals. So day 1 is that first rung at the bottom, and then lose 50 pounds, be an amazing parent, write a book is at the very top. And you go, that would be an impossible ladder to climb. And so what the book teaches is, okay, let's add some rungs. What if I gave you a ladder that had a rung every 6 inches? You could climb to the top of that easily, safely. It would be fun. And so you start with an easy goal. You say, okay, I'm going to invest a small amount of time. I'm going to do a small set of actions. I'm going to test this. I'm going to do it for 7 days, not, when you say, the absurdity of saying a New Year's resolution is, I've never done the thing. I'll do it for 365 days now. What?
Exactly. But we do it every year.
We do it. And so
it's an insanity. Yeah.
I'm crying in the wilderness. Whoa. What if you did something for a couple of days and tested it? So that's an easy goal. And then an easy goal gives you the chance to go, I am willing to turn it into a middle goal. I want to spend a little more time. I'm going to spend maybe even a little money on it. I never invest in the easy goal level. Don't make money an obstacle. If you add other obstacles to an already difficult thing, you're not going to do it. So if you say, in order for me to be a good parent, I have to go to 10 parenting classes, I have to buy the right thing, if you have to be a completely different person, you won't do the goal. And so a middle goal expands it, a little more time. And then once you're in the middle of it, you'll know, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to keep doing this. I love this enough. Somebody you should have on your podcast, if you haven't, is Jenny Urich. I don't know if you've heard of her.
No, I haven't.
She started a movement called 1,000 Hours Outside. And she's a brilliant mom. And it's global. It's massive now. But she said the same thing. She wanted to get her kids outside more. And so she started in small ways. And now she tries to get her kids outside 1,000 hours a year. But she goes, it fails all the time. She said, but I've had so many people go, this is my favorite challenge. I failed because I only was outside with my kids 200 hours this year, but they were the best 200 hours. And I would have been outside 0. So some of it is that, like, breaking free of that all or nothing. So that's what the goal ladder is okay, some small, easy goals you can try. When you like them enough, you try them in a middle way. You go a little more time, you expand it, and then you expand it again and go, no, I'm going to really lean into this. I am going to write the book. I am going to do the thing because I'm already in motion. Imagine if at the beginning of a year you said, I'm going to run 200 miles this year. That's overwhelming. That's a big hill. But what if instead you said, I'm going to try to walk around my neighborhood 3 times this week? That's an easy goal. And if I do it 3 weeks in a row, maybe I'll get myself a pair of sneakers, a new pair of shoes. Oh, now I got a reward. Now I've got a reason to keep on the ladder. And you make it into a game. And then you're going to look up at the end of the year and go, wow, I hit my guaranteed goal of 200 miles. But if I had started with that, I wouldn't have taken one step because it would have been overwhelming.
Yeah. One thing about that ladder climbing that hits me is people may say, well, I'm lowering my expectations, and B, am I compromising? What happens if I get to rung 3 and I'm done? So that there's a bit of fear in going up that as well.
The real fear is, what if I spend all this time and it ends up being the wrong thing? So we have this idea, what if I put my ladder against the wrong wall and I climb to the top? I'm not saying climb to the top. I'm saying try it for a week. If it's the wrong thing, drop it. One of the best things you can do is quit fake goals. That's the problem. People start the year with 50 fake goals and go, I should be this. I should do this. I saw this mom podcast that told me I got to do this. Disconnected from their life, disconnected from their desire, and then go, I'm a failure because I didn't do these goals. You were probably never meant to do those goals to begin with. Like, I shouldn't do a calculus goal. I'm a writer. I know that now because I've written a bunch of books. But so when I say 7-day, like a 7-day easy goal, what's the worst that happens at the end of that step? You go, you know what? I tried that goal for 2 hours, wasn't worth it. You don't mourn the 2 hours. You go, I learned about myself. You would mourn it if you said, I spent a year on something and I hated it. I'd rather you find out on rung 3. The other thing is, I'm not saying don't have massive goals. Definitely have massive goals. They can be very motivational. You should have a big goal you're aiming for. I'm saying, what if we plan our way there in a way that actually gets it done? See, most people, again, they dream about the far out thing, but they don't know how to translate the far out thing into daily actions they can take or weekly actions that they can take. So I'll give you an example. I said I wanted to be a better friend. That was a big goal. I realized I was lonely after the pandemic. Like, loneliness, I felt very lonely, isolated. I said, I want to be a better friend. It's too fuzzy. It's too big, too far out. What do I do with that? So I said, how do I turn this into a goal? What's an easy way? I said, I'm going to encourage one friend every day for 30 days in a row. I can do that. And I made it easy. I didn't say I'm going to write them a letter. Like, no, like I have to go find an envelope and stamps and addresses. Like, I've already put obstacles. Most people put too many obstacles in their goal and it guarantees they'll quit. And they hide obstacles in there because then they can blame the complexity, not themselves. So I said, I'm going to text one friend a day for 30 days in a row. Then I made it even easier. I made the list of friends. I just went through my phone contacts, because if I waited till day 4, on day 4, I'd go, who should I? And I'd quit. So I made a list, and then I just sent them an encouraging text, and no one responded with, I wish you hadn't sent that today. Today was the worst day to encourage me. 90% said, you don't know how much I needed that today. Wow. And then I said, what if I applied that just to my kids? What if I took each of my kids and I came up with 30 things I love about them, and I encouraged them once a day for 30 days in a row? Would I be a better dad at the end of that 30 days? That's a guaranteed goal. It would be impossible for me to be a worse father at the end of that 30 days, having spent time. And the problem, in my opinion, with parenting is so many people hope it happens organically without goals. I'll meet dads that have work goals, KPIs. They know their budget. They have financial goals. Some even have health goals. And you go, what are your parenting goals? And you go, I just, like kind of like see my kids more. And like, it's like jazz. They just think it's going to organically. And I go, well, what if you actually had some goals? But again, I had a big goal, be a better friend, be a better father. And then I just made it really easy and really tangible and really tactical. And then I accomplished it because I built myself a ladder.
So you really have to stop and identify a goal that's a good goal.
Yeah.
And then and also this kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, and fulfilling a potential. Don't you think that the goal should in some way tap into what brings you joy or what creates a good moment?
Oh, that's the whole point of the best moments list. The best moments list, you go, I want more of that. And then you go, I get that by operating with goals. So when I say, so what was fun about the list is you put together a 100-point list, and then there's 4 categories that every moment will fit into. Like, every single one will fit into either a relationship moment, an experience, an accomplishment, or an object. And I'll give you a metaphor that helps people. If you go on a hike, your favorite hike in your neighborhood, near your house, whatever, and you go by yourself and you just enjoy it, that's an experience. If you go with a friend and they're going through a divorce and you're able to really pour into them, that's a relationship moment. If you hike it faster than you've ever hiked it and you track it on your Garmin watch or your Strava, that's an accomplishment. If you get a pine cone that you pick up and put on your desk to remember there's a lot of beauty outside, don't miss it, that's an object. And so I had everybody label their moments. And that's where the self-awareness got even brighter and clearer, because people would go, oh, I'm an accomplishment person. 60% of my moments were accomplishment based, but I grew up in a house where accomplishments were banned, were talked bad against. I've been self-sabotaging because I grew up with parents that would say, oh, must be nice, or that's a humble brag, or we don't get ahead, that's bragging. And so I underplay my talents. And meanwhile, my list, when I gave my heart full permission to write down the truth, 60, 70% were accomplishments. What if I got more accomplishments in my life? And then you go, how do I get those? You turn them into goals. You make some goals. So yes, every single goal ladder is based on going, these are the things that light me up. And now I'm going to go get more of them in a more deliberate way. And then what happens is it always starts with self and it always ends in service. You can't help but want other people to have this experience too. Like it just always happens that way. Like, so part of the reason we have a teen version of this book coming out in the fall, because of that. Like once I had done it as a dad in my own life, I thought, oh man, if I could have gotten hold of these principles when I was 15, 16, 17, like, oh, watch out. So I went to my two teenage daughters and said, let's do a teen version of this. And so we have a teen version because there's so many teenagers that are going, I want more purpose. I want more engagement, and the entire world. Like the challenge, Meg, in my opinion, is the world is not designed for you to succeed. The world is designed for you to shop. And we haven't recognized that fast enough, that there's 100,000 of the smartest people who have ever lived whose main goal is your time. And Netflix doesn't want you to get in shape. They want you to binge. Dating apps don't want you to get married. They want you to have 100 meaningless hookups, because then you continue the business model. Their worst thing is if you find somebody you love and you quit
and you don't go back.
Yeah, you don't go back. And so you have to recognize part of why goals are hard is that Netflix is easy, Instagram is easy. And you go, okay, we're going to need some tools. And that's what this book is.
Well, and also kids have been told you really don't need to have this type of a goal or that type of goal, because anything's okay. You know, even if your goal is to starve or your goal is to do self-harm, I mean, that's who you are and that's really okay. We don't say that, but we bring that to kids because we pulled the rug out from under them saying, this is good and this is healthy. And here's how you know this is a great moment. And here's how you know, if you're feeling strong or you feel you have this potential or you identify yourself as somebody who's really good at something. But we've sort of made it so muddy. I think it's harder for kids to have goals now because anything is okay to aspire to be. And I'm dying for your book to come out. When does it come out?
Comes out September of 2024.
Awesome. Well, right here, right now, you're committing to be with me and let me talk to you about that. Because kids, I'm not kidding. Teenagers, I just was in my office yesterday, packed with these kids who are really sort of floating aimlessly. They don't know what they like. They don't know what they're good at. They don't know if they should be or if they shouldn't. And so I think it's even hard for them to admit they have best moments.
Oh, of course. Yeah. And again, for a lot of people, a lot of companies, a teen is an ATM. Like a teen, like in our high school, there's teen boys who are $1,000 in the hole in online gambling. And it happened because when they were in 6th grade, they learned how to do fantasy football. They practiced that for 4 years, and then it got turned into money when they were in 10th grade, 11th grade. And now they have gambling addictions. And dads who don't know that go, boys will be boys. I didn't gamble when I was a kid. Yeah, because you would have had to drive to a casino or find a bookie. You had no access to it. Now your kid has a casino in their pocket. And a dad who hasn't recognized the size of the change that's happened in the last 10 years all of a sudden discovers a disaster because they didn't know it was slowly happening. And so, yeah, I have a real heart for teenagers as a dad of teenagers. And it's fun to give a teen a tool that they're not going to have to unlearn bad stuff later. They're not going to have to repair things later in the same way that when I talk to a 45-year-old, we might have to look at 20 years of believing something that wasn't helpful. And we might have to retire that in a deliberate way, versus teens are picking up truth at this age. And you have a chance to go like, hey, as you're picking this up, like, what if you believed this? What if this was What if this was helpful? And then the other thing, Dr. Meg, that I think we've done, we've given teens only one like indicator light on their dashboard, and it's feelings. We've overgone and so we go, that's the only one. Now imagine if in my car, I only looked at RPM. I didn't look at the speed. I didn't look at the oil. I didn't look at the fuel. I only looked at RPM. The car would seize up. The engine would die because there was no oil. And then if I brought it into a mechanic, they go, well, what do you mean you just stared at RPM? I was like, I'm sorry, that's the only one I knew existed. But what if you had, okay, there's parental influence. There's wisdom from mentors. There's real numbers. There's data. Definitely feelings is in the mix. It's an important indicator on your dashboard. But if you only look at one indicator on your dashboard, the whole thing falls apart. And so that's what I hope teenagers can feel, is this sense of a goal is another indicator. I believe whether you're 15 or 55, you need purpose, and you need to be attached to that, and you need to pursue that. And again, it's hard right now because there's so many things designed to take your time. I talked to a D1 athlete recently, a young man, and he said, hey, I'm having troubles. And I said, well, let me just see your phone. He gave me his phone, and I went to screen time, and he had spent 20 hours on Snapchat the week before and 10 on Instagram. So he spent 30 hours. He had no idea. 30, that's almost a 40-hour work week.
Wow.
And he had no one you talk to does that and then feels better after a 4-hour school session. Yeah. Like, you haven't had a single patient in your office go, I just feel renewed. I feel confident. I feel refreshed. And that's what's hard to me for teenagers in particular, is that we've abandoned them to this wasteland of social media.
Exactly. And kids will tell you, I feel worse after I'm on social media. And they'll say that in front of a parent, and they're a 14-year-old kid. And I look at the parent and I say, you've got to help them get control. You've got to do, something. Well, I can't, because all the kids, do that. And I think that's exactly what I was saying when we have sort of pulled the rug out from under kids. We have said, if you feel strongly in this way, that's where you can go, because nothing's off limits.
Yeah.
And they should be off limits because it's bad for them, or it's going to cause them terrible harm.
Long-term harm. Yeah.
Yeah. Long-term harm.
Yeah.
And you're right. And kids are, just to follow up a little bit, kids are ATM machines. The reason our kids are so hyper-sexually active and sexualized is money. Because people who make R-rated movies don't make them necessarily for adults. They lace them with sex to pull in the 14-year-old to go and buy it, or buy the magazine, or whatever it is. And it's all targeted towards kids. But parents don't necessarily see that, because they fall into, well, all their friends want to go see 50 Shades of Grey. You know how popular that was with junior high kids, girls?
Oh, no.
50 Shades of Grey. Yeah. And I thought, I wouldn't even read the books. And I reprimanded some of our office staff. Are you kidding me? You read that book. But that's made to really lure young kids in, to help them, reestablish their goal. The book is incredible. Obviously, I could talk to you forever. You're just such a wealth of knowledge. My guest today has been the remarkable Jon Acuff. And his new book is All It Takes Is a Goal. You have to read the book, and you have to prep yourself, because next year the one is coming out for teenagers. And if you are a grandparent or a parent or an aunt or uncle, you have to help your kids, because kids have never needed help like they do today. Jon, thank you for setting another goal. Book number 8.
I appreciate that.
No, book number 10. Book number 10.
No. So I've already turned in book number 9, which is the teen version. This was book number 8. Yeah, I'm going to keep going. I love doing it. It's a fun thing for me. And again, your book meant a lot to me and my daughter. So it's always a pleasure to come on here and brag on you a little bit too.
Well, thank you, Jon. Thanks for coming.